Imagine a cold evening in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Outside, winter presses against the old brick buildings of Harvard University. Students walk quickly across the campus, their coats pulled tightly around them. Lights glow behind dormitory windows. Somewhere nearby, a door closes. Somewhere else, friends laugh together in a hallway. And inside one small room, a 19-year-old student sits in front of a computer. The room is not a company headquarters. There are no glass offices, no security guards at the entrance, no famous logo on the wall, no billions of users refreshing their screens. Just a young man, a single screen, lines of code, and an idea about how people might find one another online. His name is Mark Zuckerberg, and at that moment, he cannot know exactly what this quiet evening will become. He cannot see the families who will reconnect because of his creation. He cannot see the small businesses that will grow, the political debates that will rise, the privacy scandals that will follow, or the extraordinary responsibility that will one day press against every decision he makes. He sees only the next problem, and he begins to build. How does a website created for college students become part of daily life for more than 3 billion people? How does a quiet programmer become the leader of one of the most powerful companies his generation has ever seen? And perhaps the most important question of all, what happens when the thing you create grows larger than you ever imagined? In this story, we will discover how Mark's early love of programming prepared him for one extraordinary moment at Harvard. We will follow the human decisions that turned a student project into a company that changed how the world communicates. And we will explore the deeper question that followed his success. When you build something that shapes how billions of people speak and listen and share, how much responsibility do you carry for what happens next? So make yourself comfortable. Take a slow breath and let the story begin. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg was born on May 14, 1984, in White Plains, New York. He grew up in Dobbs Ferry, a quiet community a little north of New York City. His father, Edward, worked as a dentist. His mother, Karen, had trained as a psychiatrist. Together, they created a home that valued learning above almost everything else. Questions were welcome at their dinner table. Curiosity was encouraged, and Mark, from a very early age, became fascinated by computers. This was the 1990s. Computers were entering more homes, but they had not yet become the invisible center of everyday life we know today. There were no smartphones in every pocket. Social media, in the form we recognize now, did not exist. The internet was young and strange and full of possibility. For most children, a computer was something to use. For Mark, it was something to understand. He wanted to know what lived behind the screen. Why did one instruction create one result? How could typed words become actions? How could a machine be taught to do something it had never done before? Programming gave him a special kind of freedom. Not power over other people, power over possibility. You begin with an empty screen. You write instructions, and then, slowly, something appears that did not exist before, something you made. Something that follows rules you designed. As a young boy, Mark created small programs. One early example involved a simple communication tool connecting rooms in his family's home and his father's nearby dental office. The program itself was not complex, but the habit behind it was important. He saw a problem. He tried to build a solution. That same pattern, see, think, build, would return again and again throughout his life. Mark later studied at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, one of the most demanding high schools in America. There he studied classical languages, competed in fencing, and began working on more ambitious software projects. One of these was a music program called Synapse, which attracted early interest from technology companies. He continued his education instead. The simple picture of Mark Zuckerberg as a boy who only sat alone with computers is too narrow. He was competitive. He was intensely focused. He enjoyed building. And he was developing a way of thinking that would shape everything that came after. When something caught his attention, he did not only discuss it. He made something, and then, in 2002, he arrived at Harvard University. The campus was old, the internet was young, and the timing, it turned out, would matter enormously. By the early 2000s, people were already using the internet to search for information, send email, read news, and send messages to one another. But online identity, who you were, how you appeared, how you connected with others in digital space, was still developing slowly. If you were online in those years, you were often a username, an email address, a stranger in a chat room. Real social life and digital life had not yet fully joined together. At Harvard, students lived inside a strong and layered world. Houses and dormitories, classes and clubs, friendships and social groups built across shared experiences. Yet there was no single online system where students could easily find one another, present themselves, and stay connected. Mark noticed this gap, and then he made a serious mistake. In 2003, before Facebook existed, he created a website called FaceMash. The site used photographs of Harvard students and invited visitors to compare them. It spread quickly. It also created immediate problems. University officials raised serious concerns about security, privacy, and the use of photographs without permission. The site was shut down quickly. This moment is worth pausing on. FaceMash was not a heroic beginning, but it revealed something important about the pattern that would follow Mark throughout his career. he could build quickly. He understood what drew people's attention. But building quickly did not always mean thinking fully about the people affected by what he created. This tension between speed and responsibility would return years later on a scale no college student could imagine. But the story did not end with FaceMash. In early 2004, Mark turned his attention to a new idea. Harvard students had long discussed the possibility of a universal online student directory. Mark decided to create his own version. On February 4th, 2004, the Facebook went live. Students could create a profile. They could use their real names. They could connect with people they actually knew. For the first time, real social relationships were being represented online in a way that felt true to daily life. And students responded quickly. Within the first day, hundreds of people registered. Think about what that must have felt like. You build something in a dormitory room. You go to sleep. You wake up, and more people are already there. Mark was not working alone. Dustin Moskovitz, Chris Hughes, and Eduardo Saverin each played important roles in Facebook's early development. This was not the story of one person locked in a room, changing the world by themselves. Companies are built through teams, through disagreements, through shared decisions and separate responsibilities. Yet, Mark became the central force driving the product forward. The site expanded beyond Harvard, first to neighboring universities, then to more campuses across the country. Each expansion carried the same basic idea into a wider community. People want to know where their friends are. They want to see who knows whom. They want to present themselves honestly. They want to belong somewhere. Technology had found something very old inside human nature: the desire to connect. And connection, it turned out, was powerful. Facebook's early history also included a major legal dispute. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, along with Divya Narendra, argued that Zuckerberg had misled them while working alongside their own social networking project at Harvard. The dispute was settled outside of court. For a simple success story, it would be easy to remove this part of the history entirely. But then we would lose something true. The rise of Facebook was not a clean fairy tale. It included arguments about ideas, about ownership, about trust, and about power. Real history usually does. But the story did not end there. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing to Woven English. A new story arrives every week, and each one is a chance to discover history, people, and English together. In the summer of 2004, Mark and several members of the young team traveled to California. Silicon Valley had already become one of the most important centers of technology and investment in the world. For a young internet company, it offered something Harvard could not: people with money, experience, and an appetite for unusual ideas that might one day become enormous. Mark faced a decision. He could return to the expected path: Harvard, classes, a degree, a career that waited safely on the other side, or he could continue building something whose future was still completely uncertain. He chose the company. He eventually left Harvard without finishing his degree. It is tempting to call this decision obviously correct. But that is because we know what happened next. At the time, Facebook was still a small student website. The internet was full of companies that had risen quickly and collapsed just as fast. MySpace was already a powerful social network with millions of users. Many people thought Facebook would not survive. Mark was betting years of his own life on the belief that his idea could become something much larger. The team worked from a rented house in Palo Alto. The atmosphere was informal and young, but the decisions were becoming serious. One important person during this period was Sean Parker, the co-founder of Napster, a famous music-sharing service. Sean had experience in the technology world and helped connect the young company with the wider investment community. Money began to arrive. The company hired people. The network grew. And Mark made another choice that would define his leadership. Would Facebook remain a useful tool for a limited group of students, or would it keep growing? He chose growth, again and again and again. Facebook opened to more universities, then to more communities, and then to almost anyone who wanted to join. The small digital directory was becoming a global social system. But growth creates pressure. More users mean more servers, more employees, more investors asking questions, and more competitors watching closely. A founder who once wrote code in a dormitory room must learn how to lead an organization of hundreds, then thousands of people. Mark was still very young. He made decisions quickly. Some people admired that completely. Others experienced it as something closer to stubbornness. Success does not remove conflict. Sometimes it creates more of it. By the middle of the 2000s, Facebook was already growing beyond the world where it had started. Then, something happened that changed the internet again. The smartphone. People no longer needed to sit at a desk or open a laptop to enter the online world. The internet moved into pockets, into buses, into restaurants, into bedrooms, into almost every quiet moment of the day. Facebook moved with it. Now, a person could photograph something and share it within seconds. A friend could respond moments later from the other side of the world. A birthday reminder could reach you anywhere. A piece of news could arrive before you had poured your morning coffee. Connection became faster, more constant, and more difficult to escape. Facebook became a public company in 2012. By then, Mark Zuckerberg had already become one of the most recognized business leaders on the planet. But 2012 brought another important change as well. He married Priscilla Chan, whom he had met during their years at Harvard. Long before Facebook became a global giant, their relationship gave Mark's story another dimension that the headlines often missed. Behind every story about users, stock prices, and technology decisions, a family life was quietly developing. Mark and Priscilla eventually became parents. And together, they created the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, an organization focused on science, education, and building stronger communities. A clue that success had become about more than building a company. It had also become a question of what to do with the resources that company created. At the same time, Facebook was making major decisions that shaped its future. In 2012, the company acquired Instagram, a photography app that was growing quickly, especially among younger users. Instagram was simple, visual, built for mobile phones in a way that felt natural and immediate. Mark saw that communication online was changing shape. In 2014, Facebook acquired WhatsApp, a messaging service with more than 400 million users. That same year, it acquired Oculus, a virtual reality company whose technology pointed toward an entirely different kind of digital experience. These were very different bets. Instagram was about images and identity. WhatsApp was about private conversation. Oculus was about a future in which digital experience might surround us completely, not just on a screen, but inside the space around us. Together, these decisions revealed something important about how Mark thought. He was not simply protecting the original Facebook. He was trying to understand where human communication might travel next, and so the story continued growing. But so did the questions. For years, Facebook's central promise was simple: connect. And that promise was real. Families separated by countries could watch each other's lives unfold in photographs and messages. Old classmates could find each other again after decades. Small businesses could reach new customers. Communities could organize around shared causes. People who felt alone could discover others who understood them. But connection has no automatic moral direction. A road can carry an ambulance to someone who needs help. The same road can carry danger. A printing press can spread knowledge across a continent. It can also spread lies at the same speed. A social network can bring people together across every kind of difference. It can also carry anger, false information, manipulation, and cruelty at a scale that was impossible before. The tool does not choose, but the design of the tool matters. The rules inside the platform matter. The people who own and run the platform matter. And as Facebook grew larger, these questions became impossible to ignore. Criticism appeared on many sides. How much personal data did the company collect? What did users truly understand about how their information was used? Who could access it? How should a platform balance advertising with safety? How should it handle political speech? How should it treat young users? In 2018, the Cambridge Analytica scandal brought these concerns into public life around the world. The situation involved data collected from millions of Facebook users and used by a political consulting firm. The details were complicated. The public reaction was not. People felt that something deeply personal had been treated carelessly: their information, their choices, their trust. Mark Zuckerberg testified before the United States Congress. The young man, who had once answered questions about a campus project, now sat beneath bright lights before lawmakers, answering for a system that reached billions of lives. The scale had changed completely. In 2019, the United States Federal Trade Commission announced a $5 billion penalty against Facebook and imposed new privacy restrictions, following allegations that the company had violated an earlier privacy agreement. A penalty, meaning a fine, a legal punishment of $5 billion. The number was enormous. But the deeper issue was larger than any number could express. Facebook had spent years asking how many people it could connect. Now society was asking a different question. How should that connection be governed? This may be the most important turning point in the story of Mark Zuckerberg. Not the launch of the Facebook, not the first million users, not the first billion. This, the moment when success itself became the most difficult problem to solve. Building is one kind of skill. Taking responsibility for what has been built is another kind entirely, and responsibility becomes harder when there is no simple answer waiting for you. Remove too much content, and people accuse the company of controlling speech. Remove too little, and harmful material can spread unchecked. Collect information to improve a service, and users may feel their privacy has been taken. Limit data collection, and some features become less useful. Build tools for open communication, and those tools may be used in ways you never intended. There is no button marked perfect solution. There are decisions, consequences, corrections, and then more decisions. Critics argued that Facebook had often moved too slowly, had placed growth ahead of safety, and had been slow to understand how its platform could be used to cause harm. The company defended many of its decisions and changed policies over time. The debate continued. It still continues today. In 2021, Facebook, the company, changed its name to Meta. Facebook, the social network, continued to exist. But the parent company, the larger organization that owned everything, now had a new identity and a new declared purpose. Mark described a future built around something called the metaverse. A metaverse is a shared digital environment, a kind of three-dimensional internet, where people may work, play, meet, and experience things together through virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality means a fully digital world you enter through a headset. Augmented reality means digital images placed over the real world you are already living in. The ambition was enormous. Mark imagined a future in which technology became genuinely immersive, meaning it surrounded you, not just sat in front of you. Instead of looking at a screen, you might feel present inside a digital place. A meeting held in a virtual room. A concert attended from your own living room. A classroom that could be anywhere on Earth. The company invested billions of dollars in this vision. Some observers saw a brave, long-term bet on where human experience might travel next. Others saw an expensive gamble on a future that was still far away. At the same time, artificial intelligence, AI, moved rapidly into public attention across the whole technology industry. Meta increased its own investments in AI while continuing to develop new hardware and new ways for people to interact with digital systems. As of 2026, Mark Zuckerberg remains Meta's founder, chairman, and chief executive officer. The 19-year-old sitting at a computer in a cold dormitory room is now a middle-aged leader responsible for a company whose products have become woven into the fabric of global communication. That sentence sounds like the ending of a success story. But perhaps it is something else. Perhaps it is the beginning of the harder story. Because imagine telling that 19-year-old in that quiet room exactly what he was starting, that his decisions would one day affect elections, shape conversations, reach into families, friendships, businesses, schools, and living rooms across every continent. Could anyone at 19 carry that knowledge? Probably not. And this is one of the strange truths of invention. A creator often meets the full consequences of what they have built only after the creation has grown beyond their control. The inventors of the printing press could not read every book their machine would produce. The early builders of the internet could not predict every community, every friendship, every fraud, or every lonely person staring at a glowing screen at midnight. We build first. And then the thing we build begins to teach us what it can do. This is where Mark Zuckerberg's story becomes most human. Not in the triumph, in the questions that followed it. Building is not the hardest part. The hardest part is learning to carry what you have built. Mark Zuckerberg created something that gave millions of people a voice. And then he spent years learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, what it means to be responsible for how those voices travel. That lesson belongs to founders. It belongs to leaders. But in a smaller, quieter way, It belongs to all of us because you are building something too. Every English word you learn is a connection you are making. Every sentence you practice is a pathway opening between you and another person. Your voice is growing stronger, slowly, one story at a time. And as it grows, you will carry it somewhere new, into conversations, into friendships, into ideas you have not yet imagined. Keep building. Keep listening. One quiet word at a time, you are becoming someone who can reach further than yesterday. Tell me in the comments, which moment in Mark Zuckerberg's story stayed with you the most? Was it the 19-year-old alone in his dormitory room, the moment he left Harvard, or the harder questions that came later? If these stories help your English grow, please subscribe to Woven English. A new story arrives every week. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next story.